Okay, Chapter 8, Planned Deception, Staging of a New Age Messiah. Shirley MacLaine, A New Age Case History. Quote, Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Timothy 4:1, King James. Another quote. Your dogmatic religions, for example, are most limiting for mankind because they demand unquestioned reverence for authority and exterior authority. You are God. You know you are divine. John, a disembodied spirit, talking to actress Shirley MacLaine, Out on a Limb, page 209. She goes on, or she starts. Shirley MacLaine, obviously talented, obviously intelligent, attractive, and spiritually bewildered. Shirley MacLaine, in many respects, is a woman of sensitivity and compassion. She is, however, typical of the millions who have become caught up in the New Age philosophies. Unknowing to many such blissed out seekers, these philosophies have as their ultimate objectives the opposite of the seeker's deepest personal desires. Shirley MacLaine is typical of those who have surrendered analytical judgment for intuition and abandoned God-given reason to spiritual entities. Her story is a fascinating case history of one's entry and progression in the New Age movement. The common denominator binding the multitudes of New Agers from many diverse groups together is one of common mystical experiences. And it is those same themselves within the New Age movement in all its various manifestations. Those experiences are usually triggered by curiosity and dabbling in a biblically forbidden area, the occult, which clearly is the realm of fallen angels. Most New Agers and humanists scoff at the prospect of fallen angels and devils. Nevertheless, many are quick to enthusiastically describe their experiences with disembodied spirits and extraterrestrials of all sorts. They will tell you these are superior disembodied intelligences or their higher selves. They believe these are manifestations of supreme intelligence or a God force towards which we are all evolving. Shirley MacLaine is a prominent but unfortunately not atypical example of those who have succumbed to the prophesied seducing spirits, giving their doctrines of devils. Incredibly, many in the Christian world continue to vehemently deny the magnitude and even the existence of the New Age movement. Meanwhile, the world at large has been educated on its existence as a positive force by the vigorous work of Miss MacLaine. Her books on the movement have sold phenomenally well. Out on a Limb was on the New York Times bestseller list for 15 weeks before it was released for rack-size Bantam paperback printing in April 1984. Vast audiences have been educated on the essentials of the New Age movement in her numerous mass media appearances on national, highly rated television and radio programs. Housewives who would never venture into occult bookstores have received the fundamentals of her metaphysical belief system in countless magazine interviews ranging from Ladies' Home Journal to US Magazine. From 60 Minutes to the Johnny Carson Show, from the Larry King Show to the Academy Awards presentation, Shirley MacLaine has effectively presented doctrines of spirits she obviously found seductive. This talented but obviously spiritually bewildered seeker has proved to be an effective missionary at large for the New Age movement. Her story proves to be a sensitive but highly spiritually bewildered seeker. The story begins with her search for answers to her conflicting feelings stemming from an adulterous relationship with a prominent British politician. An obviously occult-oriented male friend, sensing her bewilderment, then takes her to a world-famous Los Angeles area New Age bookstore, the Body Tree. Body like the Buddha, Bohdi. There she is launched on her occult quest by an introduction to the owner. She is enchanted as he serves her herbal teas and stimulating conversation in his office. She then purchases some relatively innocuous Edgar Cayce materials. A series of no doubt demonically arranged coincidences then begins to happen. She made a trip to the ashram, where Kat, the owner, was delighted to hear of Shirley's newly found spiritual interest. Spiritual in quotes. She was told of a Swedish trance medium living in Stockholm. Shortly thereafter, Shirley's married lover called to say he would be involved in an intergovernmental conference occurring where else but Stockholm. Of course, what he didn't tell Shirley was that he was also inviting his Marxist wife to meet him there. Of course, learning of the wife's presence was a major shock to Shirley, who flew from California to meet him. Since she was stuck in Stockholm, she decided to make the most of her time. She called Kat's friends. They, in turn, arranged a meeting with the trance medium. Shirley was learning that people interested in these spiritual pursuits are worldwide and by no means confined to California. Anyone doubting the influence and extent of the New Age movement should carefully examine Miss MacLaine's book. It is complete with everything, including even Benjamin Crane, D.K. and Alice Bailey. And there's a quote. Best known of the current channeled spiritual entities appeared to be a spiritual master known as D.K. Djwal Khul, channeled by Alice Bailey and later by Benjamin Crane. She's quoting Shirley MacLaine's book. She continues. Of course, it not unexpectedly also covers reincarnation, in quotes, divinity of man, attacks on Bible and the Church from the disembodied entities. She correctly observes the worldwide scope of this movement, which is at its core a movement of those giving heed to these seducing spirits by the psychotechnologies of drugs, meditation, visualization, hypnosis, etc., etc. Universal inspiration? ? Shirley accurately perceives the universal quality of her message, but she inaccurately perceives the character of the disembodied entities presenting it. On page 166 of her book, she notes, quote, but what had taken my real attention in the vast volume of material available for study was the fact that so much of the message seemed to be universal, that is, entities channeling through a variety of people in many countries in different languages were saying basically the same thing. Look into yourselves, explore yourselves, you are the universe. Finished quote. Had Shirley taken the time to thoroughly read one more unearthly book, the Bible, she would have discovered that it definitely did not instruct people to look into yourselves. However, it tells of disembodied entities. They evidently started with the lying serpent in the Garden of Eden. Undoubtedly, it was Lucifer in convenient disguise. It told Eve that if she disobeyed God, that A, she would not surely die, and B, she would be as God. Truly, as Solomon observed, there is nothing new under the sun. Obvious possession experiences. In an all too familiar scenario to those now free from occult bondage, Shirley MacLaine describes what she believes to be energies emanating from her mind. Quote, I fell into bed. I couldn't sleep. My legs were vibrating with a strange, almost magnetic energy from inside. I shifted my position. It didn't help. Sounds like me with fucking restless leg syndrome. The energy continued to vibrate. I felt the same vibration in my fingertips and around my lips. It felt physical, but at the same time, I could feel the energy emanating from my mind somehow. I tried to focus on small, familiar things. The softness of the breeze coming through my window off the Pacific, the slap of the waves, the walk I would take in the morning. I stretched the muscles in my legs, attempting to neutralize the magnetic stream of energy flaming inside. I felt I needed somehow to ground myself in the here and now on Earth. In a ball of vibrating confusion, I rolled over and finally fell asleep. This experience led her to accurately observe, if I really believed this stuff, there was no way I could continue walking in this world the way I'd always done. It was bound to change my perceptions. She was to have similar and even deeper experience. It was obviously identical to the initiatory experiences reported by adepts of all ages. This occurred in an Andes mountain trip with a New Ager friend, the same male friend who introduced her to the supermarket-size Age of Aquarius Body Tree bookstore in Los Angeles. What Shirley MacLaine observed of herself is universally true of those caught up in the New Age movement. Their perceptions and worldview have been changed as a result of successful spirit seduction. Where are their changed perceptions taking them? To acceptance of the world teacher. Their spiritual guides are acclimating them to welcome. Uncritical acceptance. Shirley MacLaine is an obviously sensitive woman who had the expected sense of revulsion against Hitler and all he represented, and still she succumbed, at least for the time being, to the very same mythology that propelled Hitler into his actions. Her candid story reveals that at least one of her close personal friends warned her that her belief system was the stuff of which despots are made. Belief in forces. After Shirley's two major initiatory experiences, the first occurring in her bed after a séance of sorts with a trance medium, and the second in the Peruvian Andes, she came to have a belief not atypical of a child entranced with Star Wars. She writes on page 280 that, quote, it was astonishing to me how the unravelling of mystery worked. As long as there was one loose thread, it was possible to unravel the whole ball of wax. As long as the human race continued to be basically unhappy in its struggle to understand the great mystery, the impetus would be there to thwart all authority that stood in its path, whether it was the church, the state, or the revolutionary society itself. No matter where we looked, the answer seemed to be in a force that was more knowing, more wise, more understanding, and more benevolent than we ourselves. And before we could understand that force, we would have to understand ourselves. We then became the great mystery. She's quoting all this from Shirley MacLaine's book. Called by whom? Finally, Shirley's friend, himself, obviously under the influence of the same spirits, drops a real bombshell on her. She has been called to be a New Age teacher. Quote, "What it comes down to, Shirley, is that you're to be a teacher, like me, but on a much wider scale." Dialogue ensues, and Peter continues instructions he said he received for Shirley from an extraterrestrial woman named Maya. You know, they're never called like Gertrude. She thought that with her young particular mental bent, you could write a very entertaining, informative account of your personal excursion into these matters and maybe teach people at the same time. Kind of grooming. Like grooming. Being manipulated. Not that it's just been manipulated by the devil or something, but manipulated by some famous actress, lots of money. Hey, Shirley. And so he did. Funny? Hardly. Sad? Definitely. I cannot feel anger for Miss MacLaine, even though she clearly shows she has even accepted Benjamin Crane and Alice Bailey. Clearly, she is the victim. The sad pattern started with an illicit sexual relationship. This act of disobedience, in turn, led her in truth to seek for answers as to her future from biblically forbidden sources. This, in turn, led her to obvious possession, although she saw it as a fresh source of energy. Once possessed, her attitudes towards God, prayer, and the Bible as the inspired word of God hardened. After the possessory experiences, her references to prayer and God thereafter were couched in terms of, so to speak. The cycle continued with intensified reading of occult materials and continues, at least as of the point of the publication of her book, with her continuing to popularize the occult New Age movement. Shirley MacLaine discovered the same thing that I had become aware of in researching the New Age movement. It is a truly global phenomena. As Marilyn Ferguson would express it, Shirley had become an Aquarian co-conspirator. And she finishes with a quote from Shirley MacLaine. I found that the theory of the progression of souls through the process of reincarnation had become part of New Age thought systems, not only in California, but all over the Western world. Over casual conversations, it would come out, and whenever I pursued it more seriously, I found that people were thirsty to compare notes on their feelings about past life recall and spiritual consciousness. They usually concluded by saying it was good to have a serious dialogue on such theories with someone who didn't believe they were crazy. Some of the people were just regular citizens in their respective countries, and then in italics. But others held high-level positions of influence in political and journalistic circles. The latter were careful to hold their beliefs close to their vests and felt saddened by the need to do so. Emphasis added. And that's the end of chapter 8.